Dumbo 2019 movie reads storybook. Once upon a time, a ragged little circus rolled into a ragged little town. The circus folk unpacked their gear and got to work. Their cheerful racket echoed as the striped tent went up. And at the heart of the hubbub were a happy mama elephant and her brand new baby. But there was something unusual about this little one. The baby's big ear made it hard for him to see. The circus children, Millie and Joe, tried to teach him to blow his ears off his face. But the little elephant accidentally snorted a feather right into his trunk. Ah, ah. Achoo, into the air he sailed, and for a moment, it almost looked as though he were flying. But then down to the ground he tumbled. Soon the baby appeared in the circus for the very first time. Out he went, with his giant ears hidden. But a feathered hat caught his eye, and achoo, everyone could see the little elephant's giant ears. Dumbo, Dumbo, the crowd chanted, laughing. They began to throw things at the poor little creature. Dumbo's mama rushed in to save her baby, and in all the panic, the circus tent gave out. The tent was ruined. The stands were ruined. The circus was nearly ruined. And Dumbo's mama was locked up. The next day, Dumbo's mama was taken away. Dumbo was alone. But he wasn't all alone. That night, Millie and Joe came to visit him. It wasn't the same as having his mama, but it was good to have friends. Especially friends who brought peanuts and feathers. And once again, achoo, Dumbo was flying, really and truly flying. Finally, the circus was ready again. The tent was patched, the bleachers were rebuilt. And Dumbo was about to make history. Maybe if he became a circus star, he could get his mama back. Clutching his feather, Dumbo soared through the tent. And just like that, he was a star. Soon, Dumbo's rugged little circus was just as famous as he was. Too famous for a ragged little town, at least according to the big-time circus men. V.A. Vanderveer. Before Dumbo and the children knew it, their ragged little circus had been bought by the big-time circus men. And they were off to New York to Dreamland. The new tent was bigger, the new crowds were bigger, and the new city was much bigger. It made Dumbo feel even smaller. He gave a frightened little cry. And out in the night, someone heard that cry. Someone who recognized it. Someone who cried back, "Mama." Dumbo's mama was also in Dreamland, but locked up tight. And yet, even through the thick bars, Dumbo felt her love warming him. Vanderveer refused to let Dumbo's mama go. He thought Dumbo was better off without a mama. But Dumbo didn't agree, and neither did the circus folk. The very next night, they staged a breakout. Dumbo sailed through the sky. On the ground, his mama bumped along in a stolen truck. And soon, Dumbo and his mama were reunited. Dumbo's friends understood the circus was no place for elephants. Or any wild animals, for that matter. They helped Dumbo and his mama find a new home in the jungle. And so, at last, and for good, the very special elephant and his mama lived happily together and free. The end. Dumbo happy to help. Way to go. Can we try a loop-de-loop next? Cried Timothy Mouse as he flew through the air atop Dumbo's hat. The little elephant used his giant ears to zoom straight to the very top of the circus tent. Way to go, whooped Timothy Mouse. Can we try a loop-de-loop next? Asked Timothy. Dumbo nodded eagerly and flapped his ears to gain speed. Soon he was swooping down, then up, around, and down, and across the tent again. That was our best loop-de-loop yet, exclaimed Timothy. Dumbo smiled as he landed on the ground. Great rehearsal, Timothy told Dumbo. But I think we've practiced enough this morning. What do you say we take a break? As the two friends walked outside, they heard voices call Dumbo's name. They turned to see a crowd of circus performers waving. Great flying, said a clown. You're amazing, added the sword swallower. We're very big fans, called an acrobat. Don't let this stardom go to your head, pal, Timothy whispered to Dumbo just as his own fans ran up cheering for him. Oh, it's Timothy Mouse, squealed a girl mouse. Oh, isn't he cute? Said her friend. You can have the rest of the morning off, Timothy told Dumbo with a wink as his fans dragged him away. Take a nap. We'll practice later. Dumbo nodded sleepily. That sounded like a good idea. To him. The little elephant made his way toward the circus train car, where he lived with his mother and Timothy. Suddenly, he heard someone shout, "Oh no, my beautiful balloons, they're floating away." Sure enough, a big bunch of colorful balloons was drifting into the sky. Quickly, Dumbo sprang into action. He flapped his ears and flew after the balloons. As soon as he reached them, he grabbed the balloon strings tightly with his trunk. Dumbo carried the balloons back to the balloon seller, who took them gratefully. Thanks, Dumbo, said the man. You're the best. You saved the day. Dumbo smiled a big smile. He was just happy he could help. Dumbo waved goodbye to the man, readier than ever for his nap. As he walked toward his train car, however, he saw a crowd gathered in front of the circus tent. Using his trunk, Dumbo politely nudged his way in to see what was going on. A little girl stood in the middle of the crowd with tears streaming down her face. I want my mommy, she cried. I think the poor kid is lost, said a magician. I bet her mom is just as upset as she is, a juggler said. Even the strong man was feeling sorry for her. We've got to help her, but how? He asked. Dumbo walked over and gently tapped the little girl on the shoulder with his trunk. Great idea, Dumbo, exclaimed the juggler. You can help the girl find her mother from the air. With the girl on his back, Dumbo flew high above the circus tents. Holding on tight, the girl could see everything, including her mother in the crowd. There's my mommy, she shouted happily, pointing to a woman on the ground. Dumbo landed, and the girl ran into her mother's open arms. I was so worried, said the girl's mother. Thank you, Dumbo, thank you so much. Dumbo smiled back. He was just glad that he'd been there to help. Now Dumbo was really ready for that nap. But suddenly, a pie whizzed past his trunk. Dumbo turned to see some clowns practicing their pie-throwing act. In no time, they were covered in pink whipped cream from head to toe. What a mess, said one of the clowns, licking the pie filling from around his lips. Shower time, said another. Dumbo smiled at the gooey, sticky, pie-covered clowns, and an idea popped into his head. Dumbo flew over to a tank of water and filled his trunk. Then he flew back and sprayed the water all over the clowns with one big whoosh. Instantly, the pie was all washed away. Thanks, Dumbo, called the clowns as they laughed and waved. When Dumbo finally arrived at his train car, he sighed and looked around. No balloons were loose. No children were lost, and no clowns needed rinsing off. Dumbo snuggled down into the soft hay and very quickly fell asleep. A moment later, however, Timothy walked in. Are you still sleeping, Dumbo? The mouse asked. Come on, wake up, it's time to practice. But Dumbo was too tired to even lift his head. Well, that's the last time I let you rest, exclaimed Timothy. From now on, it's just practice, practice, practice. Dumbo smiled without opening his eyes. That sounded fine to him. Practice would be easy compared to trying to get some rest. The end. Walt Disney's Dumbo. It was morning at the circus. Hopeful mothers looked up as storks flew overhead. Each stork carried a tiny bundle that held a baby animal. Mrs. Jumbo sighed as she watched the happy mothers cuddling their babies. Oh, dear. I did so hope there would be a bundle for me, she thought. A stork flew into Mrs. Jumbo's railway car and delivered a large bundle. Inside was a baby elephant. I'll call him Jumbo Jr., said Mrs. Jumbo. The other elephants thought he was adorable. Just then, Mrs. Jumbo's baby sneezed out, flapped two enormous ears. The other elephants gasped. Then they began to giggle. He looks so funny, said one elephant. Let's call him Dumbo. Mrs. Jumbo didn't care what the other elephants thought. She loved her baby big ears, and all, she lifted him up in her trunk and gently rocked him to sleep. That night, the circus train stopped and all the animals climbed out. The next morning, the circus parade made its way through town. The band played, and the people clapped and cheered. Crowds hurried to the circus tent that night, eager to see all the animals. Look at his ears, cried one boy, teasing Dumbo. Aren't they the funniest things you ever saw? Mrs. Dumbo trumpeted with anger. She raised a hay bale to throw at the boys, and they ran away in terror. The ringmaster thought she was dangerous, so he had Dumbo's mother taken away and locked in a cage. Back in the tent, the other elephants gossiped about Dumbo's mother. Such disgraceful behavior, they said. It's all his fault, you know. And they turned their backs on Dumbo. A mouse called Timothy felt sorry for Dumbo. We have to make you a star, Timothy told him. Suddenly, they heard the ringmaster. We'll make an elephant pyramid. We just need a big finish, the man said. So as soon as the ringmaster was asleep, Timothy crept into his tent. Your big finish is the little elephant with big ears, Dumbo, he said in the ringmaster's ear. Dumbo, mumbled the ringmaster. Dumbo. The next morning, the ringmaster tried out his new idea. But when Dumbo ran to jump on the top elephant, oh no. He tripped over his big ears and knocked the whole pyramid over. Now the elephants were angrier than ever with Dumbo. But the ringmaster had another idea. Dumbo could become a clown. He dressed Dumbo like a baby and put him at the top of a burning building. The other clowns pretended to be firefighters. They sprayed Dumbo with water and held a hoop for him to jump into. Poor Dumbo was terrified. Down he dropped until he fell through the hoop into a tub of sticky goo. The audience cheered and roared with laughter. But Dumbo was not happy at all. To cheer him up, Timothy said, "We'll go see your mother." Dumbo and his mother were overjoyed to see each other. Mrs. Dumbo put her trunk through the bars of her cage and cuddled her son. Sadly, it was soon time for Dumbo to go. He fell asleep. The next thing Dumbo and Timothy knew, it was morning. They opened their eyes and saw a group of crows. Dumbo and Timothy were up in a tree. "How did he get up here?" asked a crow. Dumbo was so surprised, he lost his balance. He and Timothy tumbled into a pond below. "I wonder how he got in that tree," said Timothy, shaking himself dry. "Maybe you flew," a crow joked. "That's it," cried Timothy. "Dumbo, you flew up there?" The little elephant looked surprised. "He couldn't really fly, could he?" "You just have to believe in yourself, Dumbo," said Timothy. One crow gave Timothy an ordinary feather and said, "This is a magic feather. It will help Dumbo fly." Holding the feather in his trunk, Dumbo stood at the edge of a cliff. Before he could change his mind, the crows pushed Dumbo and off he went. All at once, Dumbo was flapping his big ears and he was flying. "You did it," cried Timothy. That night at the circus, Dumbo stood at the top of the burning building with the feather in his trunk. "Take off," said Timothy. But just as Dumbo jumped, he dropped the feather and started to fall. "Flap your ears," cried Timothy. "You can fly. You can, Dumbo began to flap his ears as fast as he could. Suddenly, he was flying. He soared past the cheering crowds. Dumbo was a star. Soon, crowds were flocking to the circus to see Dumbo, the amazing flying elephant. The happy ringmaster freed Dumbo's mother and gave her a special train car just for her and Dumbo, her little star. The end.